Sponsored by the Gazette, Media, and Colorado Politics, because we are here for you trying to find solutions to very important issues here in the 719 and in the Pikes Peak region. So first, let's hear from our publisher of the Gazette and president, Dan Stever.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for coming and joining Gazette Media and our other sponsors here tonight, the AARP and Family Promise. You noticed I said Gazette Media and not the newspaper. A lot has changed in the last 15 years in our business, and the two things I'd point out to you tonight would be, first of all, we say media versus newspaper because the platforms have changed. We're on live on Facebook tonight. Our social media platform is larger than any public paper that the Gazette has ever published. And on top of that, the web is even multiples bigger than that. But I think the thing that's more relevant tonight that's changed in our business is that in our business, we as the local newspaper and a media company are less of a megaphone like the old days and more of a convener. And so we see our role has dramatically been changed. Events like this tonight remind me that our whole job as a local media company is really to engage people and to convene people and to let people know what's going on in the world so that you can run your world with all this information. Tonight you're more than a subscriber or a reader or even a consumer that is defined by what you buy and sell. Tonight you are an engaged citizen helping collectively to work to better your region. The topic tonight, of course, is homelessness, something that's been growing as an issue and a problem for our region from all sides for many, many years. Tonight we hope to focus a lot of this conversation not on where we've come or what's the issues behind us, but where are we going and what can be done. What are the solutions that we're working on? What are the solutions that we could be working on together to improve things for all citizens? The Gazette tonight has invited a lot of major stakeholders to be on this panel. We hope to get them talking to each other and talking to you and you talking to them about what can be done to improve the situation of homelessness for everyone. The reason why this panel is so large tonight, it's one of the largest panels we've had, is because we really wanted to get a cross-section of the organizations that are on the front lines of homelessness. This is not all the organizations, including our sponsors, but it's some of them. And we wanted to hear particularly from people like the city, the county, police officers, shelters, healthcare providers, nonprofits, and activists who are deeply care about this issue. And again, specifically, we hope to hear a lot about what they're doing and what they hope to do and what they think could be done, and to hear your ideas too. Tonight's panel. First of all, Mayor John Suthers, we'd like to thank you for being here tonight. When we called, and his office right away said yes because of the gravity of this issue, so we want to thank him for being here. Other panelists tonight, Chris Garvin, Deputy Executive Director of the El Paso County Department of Human Services. Chris has worked with the El Paso County Department of Human Services in various leadership positions for more than 24 years. Also tonight, Terry Anderson, Chief Operating Officer of Springs Rescue Mission, the largest homeless shelter in Colorado Springs. Terry started with the Springs Rescue Mission in March of 2013 after 31 years in the private and public sectors of information technology. Amy Cox, CEO of Community Health Partnership, a community collaboration of local health providers. Before that, you might know that Amy was the Community Development Manager for the city. And she also served as Manitou Springs City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem from 2008 to 2012. Sergeant Curtis Hasling. He has been with the CSPD for over 28 years and is the supervisor of the Colorado Springs Police Department's Homeless Outreach Team. Trig Bungard, and he is the Director of Coalition for Compassion and Action and its subsidiary of Blackbird Outreach. CCA is an activist group that tries to address the homeless crisis at its root causal factors. Blackbird Outreach serves folks where they are, surviving outside or in their homes. Finally, Beth Rolstad. She is the Executive Director of Homeward Pikes Peak and is the chairwoman of Pikes Peak Continuum of Care, which consists of several nonprofits, businesses, and local government that operate under a federal mandate to streamline and coordinate homeless services and housing programs. Tonight's community conversation gives us a chance to learn, to ask questions, and to hopefully push the ball down the field towards solutions and help for the people that need it. So Eric, back to you, let's get started.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dan. And with that in mind, you know, when I was on television, when a producer said, oh, you said the wrong thing. Oh my goodness, but that's okay because we can quickly fix it. So with that in mind, there was a quick change, and this is Lieutenant Mike Lux with the Colorado Springs Police Department. That's all right, give him a round of applause. I mean, he was sitting there. Well, let me tell you a little about it. He's assigned to oversee HOT, which is the Homeless Outreach Team, and he's a familiar face, being with Springs Police for 30 years this month. Lieutenant Lux is currently assigned as the Downtown Area Response Lieutenant and has been in this assignment for 1 year now. So give him a round of applause. Now, at this time, I'd like to be able to introduce one of our sponsors. This is our own AARP State Executive Director, Bob Murphy.
Thank you, Eric. Welcome, everyone. Wow, what a great turnout. I'm Bob Murphy. I'm the State Director for AARP. What in the world are we doing here? Some of you may think of us as this national organization, this sort of beltway behemoth with 38 million members. But we're also a nationwide organization with offices in all 50 states. Here in Colorado, we have 700,000 members and almost 50,000 members here in your community, our community of Colorado Springs. On any given night in this country, over 500,000 people experience homelessness. Disproportionately, they are over 50 years old, and those people can expect a lifespan of just 64 years and not a very good quality of life during that time. That's one of the many reasons AARP is so interested in this issue. You know, during last week's conversation on affordable housing, we heard really sort of a consensus on the scope of the problem, on even some of the solutions. Make no mistake about it, these are complex public policy issues. There was talk last week about funding, of course, and we'll hear about that tonight. There was also talk about political will. Well, I can tell you, something interfering.
It's not bad. Yes, all right. The mic's off.
Let me just say this.
There we go, take two.
All right, very quickly, I said there was some talk about political will at last week's meeting. So I can tell you as a longtime mayor and city councilman up in the city of Denver, city of Lakewood, these kind of complex issues can only be solved by the kind of collective community will that can start with a meeting like this tonight. That's why we at AARP Colorado are so grateful, so proud to be a sponsor of this event. That's why we're so grateful to the Gazette for facilitating it. And we're so happy to be part of the dialogue. Each and every one of us tonight can be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Royal, one of our other sponsors, with Family Promise.
Thank you. I'm proud to be here and especially glad to have all of you here engaged with this conversation. I want to just have a moment to tell you that in the conversation, I want to make sure that folks know that nearly 40% of the homeless are children with their parents. And that's part of this conversation that we really need to hear loud and clear and begin to address in more significant ways. We, as an organization, are relatively small in this community, but we get more than 100 calls every month from families who are seeking services. So there's a gigantic need, and I hope that as you leave this conversation here tonight, that you'll have opportunity to learn a bit about us. I've left brochures around, I have more available, and we would love to have you and the various stakeholders that you represent engaged with us. Thank you for this opportunity tonight.
Thank you very much, Michael Wall. Okay, in the old-fashioned way, just unplug it. That's the best way to do it.
That was your.
All right, so with that in mind, that's all right. With that in mind, I just want to remind everybody about the rules here. First, we have drawn names out of a hat to see what the opening order is for opening statements. We've also drawn those names out of a hat, which I had nothing to do with. That has to do with the closing statement. The opening statement will be between 1:30 to 2 minutes. The closing statement, 1 minute. Also, just want to remind you, this is a conversation. This is a dialogue. If there are problems, we will solve those problems relatively quickly. So let's have a conversation. I have Facebook questions. I also have questions from you. The more time we spend having to deal with problems, the more time we spend that we can't deal with answers. So with that in mind, our opening statement will be with Mayor John Suthers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming here this evening to address and discuss a very important community issue. Thanks to the Gazette and the sponsors that have made this possible. One of the things that's reflected in a lot of the communications the mayor's office gets is a seeming belief on the part of our citizens that our homeless problem is disproportionate, that it's somehow more severe than the rest of the country. I want to make sure we state at the outset, this is a national problem. And let me just give some context to that. We're still waiting for our point-in-time count for 2018 that was done the last week of January. But based on the point-in-time count in 2017, we had 1,415 homeless, including 457 people unsheltered. That means El Paso County has 210 homeless per 100,000 people. Here's the numbers from some others in the 2017 count. I said ours was 2010. Denver County was 489 per 100,000. Pueblo County was 1,117 per 100,000. Omaha City, relative, close in size to ours, 313. Austin, 232. Albuquerque, 235. But regardless of the numbers, there is clearly a growing frustration about this issue. There's growing frustration by folks who want to be sheltered and cannot get sheltered, who don't want to be homeless and cannot find affordable housing. I will tell you, and my mail reflects it, there is growing public frustration with the number of some of the manifestations of homelessness. People are angry about camps. They're angry about panhandling and other related issues. I'm sure we'll hear a lot about the causes of homelessness tonight. The fact of the matter is they're diverse and complex. On one hand, you've got situational homeless, people that because of domestic violence, because of loss of a job, desperately want to be sheltered, desperately want to be have a home and are unable to get it. Then we have the chronic homeless that have a fairly severe overlay of substance abuse and mental health issues that become very problematic. In the build-up to this, the Gazette stated that the proposition that after a couple of years we're back to square one. I got to tell you, I don't agree with that assertion, and part of that is because of what I think you're going to hear from an organization that I think is really doing a great job, and that's the Continuum of Care, an organization of all the groups that deal with the homeless on a day in and day out basis and are looking for solutions. Our community now has, as a result of the Continuum of Care, a coordinated entry process where providers come together to place people experiencing homelessness into housing quickly and effectively. There's no wrong door to enter the system, regardless of what agency you go to. their coordination is such that there's a single point of entry. The city and the continuum of care supports the housing first model, as do most cities around the country. Put simply, it's hard to get people to focus on getting medical care, seeking treatment, any other services they need when they're concerned with where they're going to be sleeping at night. Get them in the housing first. And for the first time in a long time, we have a couple of permanent supportive housing projects that are going to be underway this year.
Mayor, I hate to interrupt you,
Between the
but
spring.
we got to get to everyone.
That's fine. I'll look forward to the continuing conversation.
Thanks. Wonderful. Now, I'd like to introduce Chris Barr. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. I'm from the Department of Human Services, and what I'd like to highlight for you from the El Paso County perspective and human service perspective is three things I think we do well. One of those is provide aspect of prevention to homelessness. When a family comes in contact with us and they are struggling with housing instability, we are often able to use our resources to prevent homelessness. I think that's one key thing. Another thing is access to benefits, Medicaid, food assistance, temporary assistance to needy families. Those are all things that can help stabilize the family and get them connected to other resources in the community. We're very committed to working with our community partners and doing those type of things. And the other thing is outreach. We have strategically placed caseworkers and TANF technicians out in the community at 11 different locations. So it's easy access for our clients and our citizens here in El Paso County, and especially for the homeless. We often send out caseworkers and TANF technicians with a hot team to do outreach and provide quick access to benefits and make assessments of safety for children and families. And you know, it's sad that if they're homeless, it's really hard to find places for them to go. But we can bring that access point closer to them and get them connected to our community partners and with our services and trying to prevent it getting worse. So.
Thank you very much, Chris. Amy Cox.
Thank you. Am I on? Oh, thank you. I'm going to carry forward some of the themes I've already heard from Mr. Murphy, the mayor. But homelessness is difficult to solve because it's a web of issues. It's not a single issue. It's poverty, it's trauma, it's housing availability, it's mental illness, it's addiction, and some of the issues are technical. The solutions are more clear. They're easy to identify. Opening a shelter when it's freezing outside and people are left in the cold is a technical solution. But more of the challenges are what we call adaptive challenges. They don't have clear solutions. They require ongoing commitment, experimentation, and discovery, and adjustment throughout the system. We can't just set it and forget it. We know the technical issues in this community and are working on those solutions. I believe the bigger question before us is really about these adaptive challenges. And this is where leadership is the best expertise in helping us connect to the problem and creating the conditions that support the change that we want to see in our community. It's about setting realistic expectations, and that often means challenging our own assumptions, our values, and our standard ways of operating. I think it means seeing everybody in need as worthy of help. There are no deserving and non-deserving people in our community. There's no us against them. So I'm here today really to better understand what we are willing to do as a community to make meaningful progress to end homelessness, make it rare, brief, and non-recurring in our community. And I'm also here to own my share of that responsibility.
Thank you very much, Amy. Beth Rolstead.
Good evening. I wear two hats tonight on this panel. I'm the Executive Director of Homeward Pikes Peak, which is a service provider that's been delivering housing and outpatient substance abuse treatment for 15 years in our community. And as they shared, I'm also the chairperson of the Pikes Peak Continuum of Care. With our work in the community as a direct service provider, we see people every day with those severe mental illness and substance abuse dependencies, which makes getting out of their situation very difficult. We have 5 programs that specifically address severe mental illness or substance abuse in our housing programs, and it's a critical issue and there's not enough housing of this type in our community. as the Pikes Peak Continuum of Care, we have 3 areas of emphasis that I'd like to share with you. The first is our mission is to address stimulating, supportive, and affordable and attainable housing for all people and support the long-term shelter plans for our community. Also, we trigger the development of programs that move people from crisis to independence. And we build systems of providers that are focused on high outcomes for each person that are sustainable over time. So as a community stakeholder board, we're really looking at durable, long-lasting solutions for our community, but we're also not afraid of innovation. So that's why I'm particularly interested in tonight's conversation, so that we hear from you what the community will and the political will is, so that we can carry forward ideas to address long-term solutions in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lieutenant Mike Lutz.
So in 2009, the police department started the homeless outreach team. Our goal was then, and still is today, to connect homeless individuals with service providers and assist them getting out of homelessness. Now this is a unique assignment for officers because it's non-traditional policing. The HOT officers do more counseling than they do arresting or traditional police work. They really walk a fine line between actual police work and the counseling area. Although homelessness is not a crime, there are behaviors and activities that do pose a risk to the community, and we understand that. And that's why we respond to each of the situations and assess them. So anytime you call about a homeless individual or camp or something like that, we either send the HOT team officers out there, or we send regular patrol officers to assess it. We don't just put that on the back burner. We actually do respond and check that out. But with that said, and my boss is here, I want to make sure he understands this. There are only 4 officers assigned to the HOT team. And that's my pros and my boss and my mayor. You don't get many times I sit right next to the mayor. But with that said, really, we only have 4 officers assigned just to the HOT team. It is a different type of assignment. We cover 200 square miles and 100 miles of trails and open space. Most of the camping, or people who are camping or homeless, are living on your trails and open space. Last year we posted 339 camps, and then code enforcement, who is our partner, cleans those camps up. Code enforcement only has a small amount of people working that as well, and they do all our cleanups except for just a small few where we use Keep Our Streets Beautiful, which also do a great job. This year we posted 53 already. I don't know if you've noticed, we've done a lot of cleanups already along the trail system. So keep that in mind, we're working diligently. And we partner closely with SRM, Urban Peak, and RJ Montgomery. Okay,
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Terry Anderson.
First, let me say I'm very encouraged to see the turnout tonight. Thank you for coming. On behalf of the Springs Rescue Mission, we're looking forward to the conversation. I guess by way of introduction, what I'd like to say that homelessness, and chronic homelessness in particular, is not a collection of statistics, nor is it a problem to be solved. It's a group of people. And they're people whose parents gave them a name. And they're someone's father or mother, sister, brother. They're someone's child. And they're people by circumstances have found themselves trapped in poverty or crippled by trauma, struggling with mental illness, coping with those through addiction, and in some rare cases, yes, by choice. And I'm excited on behalf of the Rescue Mission to be here tonight and say that we're committed to best practice solutions. And we are making progress. Not enough, but we are making progress. And by best practice solutions, I'm simply pointing to housing, affordable, permanent supportive housing. Homelessness, the word means I don't have a home. The second best practice is health. There is a lot of physical and mental health challenges in this population. And lastly, work. You cannot sustain your health or your housing if you do not have meaningful, self-sufficient employment. And I'm looking forward to how this all unfolds tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Drake Bungard.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. What a difference almost 2 years makes. I remember on April, exactly 2 years ago, we did a mass sit-in protest against the Pedestrian Access Act. And ever since then, it seems like the dialogue, the quality of discussion and narrative keeps growing and growing across the city. And frankly, if my voice is shaking, and that's not because I'm nervous, it's because I'm so deeply moved to see all the attention being paid to this subject tonight. So, first of all, if I may humbly ask us to acknowledge that, please turn to the person next to you, and whether you're pro and care deeply about people suffering outside, or whether you are angered and you're here as a concerned citizen, turn to each other and say, thank you for caring, thank you for being here. And there's a lot of things that we can agree on as a group, and I'm wondering if we can have a vocal response on this. If you would prefer to not have chronic visible homelessness in Colorado Springs, please say yes.
Yes.
If you would prefer not to have people forced to live outside in tents, please say yes.
Yes.
If you would prefer to have affordable housing solutions to help people get off the streets, please say yes.
Yes.
Well, I think we're done here.
Well, that was pretty quick. All right, let's go ahead and get to the questions. And let me just show you these, okay? These are a lot of the questions that we've had. I'm going to try to go through these, and we're going to talk to our panelists. I think right now, the elephant in the room, right this moment, is legal marijuana bringing the homeless to our community and communities where legal marijuana exists. I'm going to start with who you would start. I'm going to start with a tree.
Well, I know if I'd been an adult when it passed and not moved here when I was 10, I would have moved here for it. We know that from our surveys, every year we do the pit count like the mayor referenced. We ask as part of that survey, what was the last zip code you lived for 90 days or more, establishing permanent residency, correct? So for 5 years running now, when we've been starting to collect that data, over 60% for 5 years, it's always been higher than 60%, are right here from Colorado Springs. If you expand that out to Colorado as a whole, what is it called? 68% are from Colorado. So we didn't see a spike in 2014 when Amendment 64 passed. I will, however, shock you and say I do think legal marijuana and craft beer is responsible for our spike in homelessness, because it makes Colorado a really awesome place to live, which has brought a lot of people to our state. I think it's 100,000 per year. And that's making our property rents and our property values and rents rise dramatically, which is awesome if you own a house. According to the county assessor, we are making out very well from that. I'm looking at my wife. So it's great to own a house. But that also causes a lot of people not to be able to afford a house. So I do 100% agree. I think recreational marijuana, craft beer, awesome skiing, 300 days of sunlight, that does play a role, but not in the way that most people anecdotally say.
Mayor Southers?
Here's what I know, having acquired some information the last couple of weeks. There's an organization in town called Elevated Insights that does public opinion surveys. And they surveyed panhandlers in Colorado Springs and asked them if they weren't from Colorado Springs, why they chose Colorado Springs. The number one cited reason was access to marijuana. The number two cited reason was the people are nice. I also, and I think Lieutenant Bucks can confirm this or not, I've spent a lot of time with the homeless outreach folks, the team, asking them for the chronic folks that don't want to be sheltered, at least resist sheltering. Why do they say they don't want to be sheltered? And I think one of the common responses is, I want to smoke pot when I want to smoke pot, I want to shoot up when I want to shoot up, and that's inconsistent with a shelter life, even in a low barrier shelter.
Yep.
Mike, do you have any?
No, I would say that's accurate. That's coming from the homeless outreach team. When they go out, they're talking to what seems to be a much younger crowd that's out there now, that's chronically homeless, but also it seems to be enjoying that lifestyle and not wanting to move away from that lifestyle. And part of the reason they're giving is because the ability to smoke marijuana. So it's accurate.
I'd like to interject that we cannot equate a panhandler equal to a homeless person. Not all panhandlers are in our homeless population. And the second thing I'd like to define is what is chronic homelessness. So an individual could be identified as chronically homeless through a HUD definition if they've experienced over 3 months of continuous homelessness, 90 days in a 12-month period, or they have 12 months of homelessness that piece together over 3 years. So that is our HUD definition. That's how we will prioritize individuals who come in for service through that lens. So there are folks who experience a homeless who are outside for a very long time, but they may not be, quote, chronically homeless.
I would just like to add from an employment, view. A lot of our families we have involved with employment services, and the biggest barrier is sometimes they can't pass the drug test. And whether or not legalization of marijuana has caused that, I don't think so, because marijuana and substance abuse are as old as mankind. But I do see that, they go for a job interview, they can't pass the drug test, or they lose a job because of using substances, including marijuana. So therefore, that adds housing instability, inability to pay their bills, and so they come into our systems and sometimes they become homeless. So it's kind of hard to say that. There's two theories of that actually that I looked up. One was social selection theory, is does substance abuse lead to the streets? Or the other one is social causation, which is the streets increase substance abuse. So if you're on the street, you self-medicate to get through it. So which way is it? It's hard to say.
All right, let's move on since we're talking about homelessness. A great question. Anyone can respond to it who they feel comfortable. Has the city considered a housing first policy? And what does the panel see as the pros and cons of this kind of policy? Also identify what the housing first policy is for homeless folks.
Housing First is a evidence-based practice of housing the homeless. This is taking people off the streets as they are, placing them into a apartment or a home with wraparound services that provide the individual with a medical care, mental health, or substance abuse treatment, but mostly a navigator to help them apply for benefits, to go to appointments. Often there's transportation assistance. But the best thing about these programs is often those services are brought to where the clients live. So if we look at Housing First models around the country, these are robust apartment buildings that have service providers on site, living or having offices on the first floor of an apartment building. Now, we use Housing First right now. We have approximately 8 service providers in our community with Housing First voucher programs that HUD funds. It's the top priority for HUD funding right now. So we have well over 300 individuals and families using a Housing First model through a variety of service providers, my agency, Homeward Pikes Peak, being one of them. I'm also very happy to say that we have 2 permanent supportive housing apartment buildings being built in the near future. One of them will be built on the Springs Rescue Mission campus called Greenway Flats, and the second one is called Freedom Springs. It's a partnership between Volunteers of America, United Way, and the Facino Group, which is the developer. We hope that both projects break ground this spring and open their doors, providing housing to 115 individuals. Freedom Springs is 50 units for veterans. Springs Rescue Mission is 65 for adult women and men. Hope I didn't steal your thunder here, Terry.
I think the city deserves a great amount of credit for this shift to Housing First. When we launched the initiative to end homelessness in 2014, we stated in that plan that we were going to move towards a housing first principles. Prior to that, we were not. We were a housing ready community. You did not get access to housing until you were ready for housing, which meant that you were sober or you were employable. And so the city really took that big, bold stand and actually attached its funding, all of the federal dollars that it receives. It made a requirement that organizations would have to begin to reduce their barriers. And they did that, the city did that in a way that allowed some time for this concept to be embraced by the community. But I really believe the city deserves a lot of recognition for that.
We all know that permanent supportive housing works. We visited communities, Buffalo, New York, Duluth, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and others, where they are 8 to 10 years ahead of us in the journey of permanent supportive housing. Buffalo, New York is a city similarly sized to Colorado Springs. They have a shelter that's smaller than ours, and it's never full. Because a shelter is designed to be to homelessness like an emergency room is to healthcare. You receive people, you stabilize them, you transition them. And when there is nowhere to transition them to, they back up in the shelter system, and that's where we're at. We need several more projects like Greenway Flats and Freedom Springs if we're going to solve the system that people are backed up to, and that includes working. We have 55 people living in our shelter right now who have day jobs and can't afford housing.
Can I interject? If we had 1,000 new units of permanent supportive housing by the end of the year, that would take care of all the adults in our shelter system right now and about 300 more that we know where they are. They have gone through the housing survey, the VI-SPDAT, and that they need a housing solution provided to them. So imagine that if we had 1,000 more units, apartments available by the end of the year.
What was a reality check to actually make that happen as far as cost-wise, as far as being able to build it? Last week, Community Conversations specifically dealt with the affordable housing issue.
Yeah.
Well, there's not enough to help the affordable housing. How are we going to be able to, structure that into the homeless issue?
True. I mean, I wish I had a magic wand to build 1,000 units of housing, but there are many tools at our disposal. There could be rehab and acquisition of existing properties and create 10 units here, 25 units there. There is state grant programs through the Division of Local Affairs and Division of Housing to acquire properties. There's CDBG funds and home funds. And then there is the LIHTC, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. Yes, permanent supportive housing is a very expensive form of housing. A typical project for 50 units can be upwards of $14 million to build. But some of that is the integration of services over the first 5 years of providing that service to the residents of the building. So you can't just say we can't do PSH because it's too expensive. It has to be part of a whole community plan on housing, and it's just one form is permanent supportive housing.
Trey?
I'm a both and guy, so while I want to acknowledge that we're making amazing strides and we're building facilities we've never had before in our city, there's an and to that. And the and is that right now, the vast majority of our PSH vouchers are not relying upon service-oriented structures and facilities being built. They're literally just apartments. That's where the vast majority of our permanent supportive housing clients go with their vouchers. The problem is right now, actually, I don't know right now. I wasn't at the meeting today. As of a couple of weeks ago, about 47 outstanding vouchers for PSH are just floating out there for people camping because they can't find a landlord that will A, take it, and B, that they can afford. Because the vouchers right now are maxing out about $735. And there's not an apartment out there for them to get into. So, right now, building more permanent supportive housing, which is very expensive, is a solution. We need to be pursuing that, we need to be funding that, but also we need to be realizing as a community that we all have a stake in this, especially as property owners. If we want to see a reduction in homelessness, we might need to take a look at the profit margins and say, I can literally house this many people with my property if I was willing to actually serve people with a voucher.
Mayor, you were nodding your head while Trey was talking.
Well, that's because he's correct. There'll be probably some things where I'm not nodding my head, but I just want to add to it, this voucher problem, that's in my opinion, that's what's kept us from zero veterans homelessness. I've made a pledge to try and eliminate veterans homelessness, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point in time, we're able to put a voucher in the hands of every homeless veteran. But that doesn't mean that there's a landlord out there that's willing to take that voucher as opposed to a market rate rent that they're competing with. And I spent a lot of time with the apartment association asking our apartment owners, this is something we need as a community, and asking for their cooperation. We've got some, but it's a very tough problem.
And I'd like to add that the veteran housing voucher is about $100 more a month for that rental rate, and they still aren't able to meet that in our community.
Jerry?
So I would say that there's a couple of different things. One, we didn't start this journey 10 years ago. We started it 2 years ago. And the communities that are ahead of us got started sooner. So we need to have the will, collectively, to keep pursuing what we know works. In the meantime, there are some other options. We currently operate a motor inn on Nevada that has 15 units in it of supportive housing. We're able to offer that at a rent rate that is substantially below the market rate because it costs us substantially less to deploy the property. We have other idle real estate assets in our community that could be considered for some of these bite-sized pieces. We're looking at another motor inn right now that's vacant. It has room for 22. Now 22 is not 600, but we keep taking bites out of this and all of a sudden one day we're going to look up and go, wow, we've got somewhere. So while we're continuing to push the ball down the field with supportive housing, it's complicated, it takes time, it's expensive, we need to keep going. And while we're going, we can work on some other ideas in the meantime.
Amy, you're nodding throughout this.
I mean, I don't want to turn this into the housing, affordable housing forum, but yeah, one of the things, these projects are very expensive, and we need new construction. We can take bites out of it, yes, and we should. We need to do whatever we can, but we really need to build. We need to build new complexes, and you know, quite frankly, we have supportive housing is housing for people who have serious issues. We couldn't even get, or we're really struggling with getting Broadmoor Bluffs built in this community. People don't want apartment complexes in their neighborhoods. And I think we have to have that conversation with the community. How do we design these facilities to really enhance neighborhoods? I spent a lot of time in San Diego, and let me tell you, I would love to live in one of those condominium communities. And we're going to have to really talk about what that looks like in our community to get the density and get the numbers that we need.
All right, we were talking earlier, Lieutenant Lux, because he has his boss right next to him, so he's going to be able to hear from the police department. So the question is, if you talked about that you didn't have enough on the hot team, the homeless outreach team. So how many do you need, and what exactly would these new officers do?
So that's a loaded question.
The mayor, go ahead and listen to it, it's okay.
So I gotta tell you, and I've talked to a few different groups, that the police department has a very small function in this. This is really not, we're the enforcement part, but again, we don't look at it as the enforcement that's going to change everything. These are the people that have been doing, one, much longer than me, and two is that they have better roles than I do in this. And I would say that at this point, the 4 officers are effective, but we've also made strides to add additional officers. We've trained our DART team, which is a downtown response team, to do the same thing that the hot team is doing when they're not working at certain functions downtown. And also we trained 2 officers from each division to also go out and work in their particular division so they have some ownership to this. And it might be a quicker response to those areas around those divisions. So I think we're working on it. I would ask that we have a lot more officers. But then again, there's got to be a balance. And I think we're balancing it out pretty well with what we have. And we're working very closely with EPSO, so that helps us out quite a bit. Thank you.
I'd like to add that Lieutenant Lux and I sat down a couple of weeks ago to mirror a program that they have in Denver County, which is substance abuse and mental health workers pairing up with homeless outreach team police officers and going out on calls together so that we have resource and referral experts right there with the hot team who are also trained in mental health so that they can provide immediate assistance, de-escalate, and connect someone with a warm handoff to treatment. Because we know that that can be a biggest barrier for someone to get help, is that they don't trust that the help will be there when they need it. So we are looking at a collaborative grant application right now to provide mental health and substance abuse treatment folks with the hot team.
You know, before Amy, you know, Beth, when you were talking about that, the first thing that came to mind is there is money available. You're talking about money available. The mayor has talked about money available. Everyone on this panel has talked about money that's available. Trigg, you talked about different availabilities for cash. So why is it that it seems like it's not funneling down to this area?
Well, I think it gets the capacity of the organizations that are applying for the grants. So, for example, my organization has 15 employees. We're a $1.5 million organization. If I'm going to apply for a new grant for $50,000 to have a staff person assigned to the hot team, can I hire that person? Can I pay enough? Can I supervise that person? And I think every organization needs to ask themselves that question. But the funding sources, there are a variety of them from the state. So we'll be looking at a state fund that's provided by state-level marijuana tax dollars. So $11 million has been set aside for the whole state in substance abuse treatment from marijuana tax. So that's what we would be using.
Amy?
We do need more outreach in this community, and I can tell you that Trig and I had a conversation. When you were creating Blackbird Outreach, we talked about the need for more outreach workers in this community. It isn't only specialized law enforcement. And I know when we launched the initiative to end homelessness, I think we had 4, other than the hot team, we had 4 outreach workers in a community, a county of 620,000 people. So I do think there are other ways to do that. And I do think Blackbird needs to be recognized for really stepping up and filling that gap in our community, because we did not have regular, consistent outreach, and that is a key part of a homeless service delivery system. You have to be able to get out into the camps, get out into the street, figure out who these people. Hi, who are you? How are you? What can I do to help you on a daily basis? And then you have to help. And I think you should speak more to the work that you do, because it's meaningful in the change that we're seeing in this community.
Okay. We've really been trying to figure out how to sell outreach because it seems almost impossible, but I guess the best way to do that is, could I have my downtown team lead stand up? Yeah. You don't have to be 6'4", 300 pounds and Grizzly Adams-ish. That's probably one of the most astounding things about getting out on the trails and meeting people where they're at is most of us aren't aware of our unconscious biases until we're confronted with what we think our unconscious bias represents, and they fall away. And I'm happy to report that in 2 years of outreach, one of them is CCA outreach, and then we just finished our first year's Blackbird outreach. We've had no incidents with volunteers in camps, and I just ruined it probably. It's not coming. But it's a very exciting and fulfilling and troubling and emotionally gut-wrenching thing, but there are great successes along with the struggles, and I would highly recommend, if you go to our website, you'll see Natasha say, come on a bike ride, come on a hike, come with me. So let's do that.
Terry and then the mayor.
Okay, towards the funding, I'll be bold and say we don't have enough funding yet. Springs Rescue Mission embarked on a very significant and aggressive and aspirational expansion at our campus several years ago. We're halfway there, and only halfway. We went from sheltering 60 to 300, and we're looking at raising that number some more, looking at next winter. We have our first resource center in our community that has public showers, public laundry, access for partner agencies to provide the care that's needed for the folks that we're serving. But we're only halfway there, and we're experiencing that challenge. So I would love to talk to anybody afterwards that thinks that there's some more resources we could tap to finish a project that's half done.
Mayor.
Well, in addition to that, I think the most difficult funding issue is new construction of permanent supportive housing. You've heard, we're talking, 16, 17, 18 million dollars for 65, 70 units. Folks, that doesn't happen unless you can convince a developer to become involved. Now, why do they have any incentive to do so? There are tax incentives for doing it. So, for example, in the case of the rescue mission and Greenway Flats, with that 65 units, Norwood is the developer. And, Norwood's got plenty of things to develop other than this. This is not going to be a highly profitable development for them, but they're willing to go through the regulatory process and do that. There's a national developer, I think, in the case of Freedom Springs. Vecino. And we need to attract some of those national developers that are in the business of doing it. because this is an expenditure of a lot of money. In the case of the rescue mission, I second what the rescue mission had to say. There's been a lot of, I really am absolutely convinced that the vision that we've got for the rescue mission is a good one. For those of you who are concerned about some of the things that go on downtown, I would love to be able to have a full-service kitchen at the rescue mission for the day meal, and Catholic Charities has been willing to have family meal at the Marion House and have the normal day meal that's now attracting 500-600 people at the rescue mission. So there is funding issues, and one of the things that I think is incumbent upon the city to try and attract these public-private partnerships that are necessary to generate this kind of money.
Chris?
I think another strategy towards this is to have our public housing authority prioritize homeless families, homeless individuals. And I know El Paso County Housing Authority provides a lot of funds for rental assistance, those kind of things. So maybe we look at that more in depth and utilize our public housing authority systems in a more strategic way.
Something that's going on throughout the country is it's slow but sure, and it's talking about how we can employ the municipal government actually employing homeless individuals, i.e. in Fort Worth, there is a $48,000 municipal investment for 40 people. These are homeless people who are on the streets, and they are getting paid $10 an hour to clean up the city of Fort Worth. Denver is doing something very similar. I don't know the numbers, but is that something that we could consider in this area? Because when I was learning more about it, the person who they were talking about was going, wow, I'm not on the streets anymore because I feel good about myself. I feel I'm earning something. I feel that something positive is happening in my life. Go ahead, Chris.
I think that's an excellent strategy. That comes from Albuquerque as the model for that, a better way. And Denver's picked it up. A number of cities have. And I think it's a good thing we should try in Colorado Springs. It adds this sense of pride and some self-sufficiency, maybe, and gives people connected to resources and access. Again, it's a way to engage people.
Let me tell you some of the things we are doing. Currently today, there are 41 men living in our addiction recovery program at the mission and working 20 to 35 hours each and every week. We have 40 guests in our shelter who work 2-hour shifts at the rescue mission in exchange for the services they receive each and every day. We have 55 guests in our shelter who have public gainful employment, not housing, but employment. They're going to work each and every day. We have another 15 men who are working every day in our subsidized rental program. So we do have work programs. We don't have TED Talks about them, and they're not temporary, as some of these programs can be. You can't employ someone $10 an hour for 2 weeks and give them a tax form and move on to the next person. That's not self-sustaining employment. It's flashy, but it's not self-sustaining employment. So those are some of the things we're working on that we feel are more long-term.
Thank you for pointing that out, folks, because I went to Albuquerque. I know Mayor very well, and so I went down there to look at the program. They averaged 16 people a day. It was really a day work program. When I came back and analyzed what was going on here, the rescue mission is putting much more people to work than that. And to avoid ever issuing a W-2, and you know this, Terry, better than I do, you can only let them work a couple of days, right?
$600 a year.
Yeah, so what I would propose, and I think the city can be a partner in this, I think we look to organizations like the Rescue Mission and others, other nonprofits, and maybe, we supply funding to clean up medians. We supply, but I want them to run the programs. I really do. And I think they'll do a heck of a lot better job than the government would do. And by the time you get through all the government regulation, I know they'll do their job. The government will do.
Trick. Ask and ye shall receive. FedEx, stand up. And again, you don't have to be 6'4" or 300 pounds. It's not the requirement to work with folks outside. We started a program called Uplift, and it is a work program for folks outside. So if you need yard work done, things cleaned up, call Pastor FedEx.
The mayor is aware of our program. We actually met with him last year. We actually came to one of their events. We did clean up a neighborhood. We brought a crew of homeless guys out, and we helped out with the neighborhood cleanup. I met with Councilman Scorman today. I met with Lisa Crow, your boss, a couple of months ago. We are working right now to develop a program where the city hires us to clean up areas around the neighborhood, where the county pays us, where we are the program that employs them. They contract with us, and we're also working with, because we believe in sustainability, we don't believe that the city or the county or anybody should bear all that burden, so we're actually working with private businesses, neighborhood organizations, a lot of other people, to try and get them to help contract so that we can clean up the city and put people to work. And if you want more information about it, look me up or go to Facebook and look up Uplift Work Opportunity.
And Pastor,
Well, hold on one second, just for our folks who are listening on Facebook who couldn't hear what he was saying. Basically, it was a sustainable program for jobs that is done here. We were talking a little bit, there was a Newsweek article talking specifically about all these things in other cities, but it's happening here, and we can learn a little bit more for our folks on Facebook who are wondering, what exactly was he saying? Great.
So, not to put a damper on things a little bit, but let's get a little bit real for the folks outside. You can be fully employed and still be living in a tent. That's very, very common in the people that we meet. Secondly, okay, so I don't want to point the finger. Notice I have 3 coming back at me. Notice anytime that I do this, I'm really blaming myself for this too, because I am a business owner. There is, essentially, once you're outside and you've lost your house, there's basically 2 addresses that you can apply for a job with. One is a P.O. box at Marion House, and one is at Visit Springs Rescue Mission. Employers in our city know those addresses, and they're prone to pass those applications over. Again, if we as a city want to see people get off the streets, we have to start confronting these biases and start correcting some of these behaviors. It's really dangerous. I mean, homelessness is a non-protected class. Let me give you an example. We filmed with Fox 21 a promotion for Indie Give. Anybody heard of Indie Give? Please give next year. And Fox 21, we went through very diligently. We asked everybody in one of the big camps who could be on camera. Everybody said yes or no. But in one of the interview shots over my shoulder, an employer saw an employee and fired him the next day for being homeless, who had said no, he didn't want to be on camera. So there is nothing illegal about that. You can discriminate against people for their economic or housing status. That is something as a community we have, like, this community, I know we can do that, but we have to at least acknowledge it's a problem and confront it first.
Response, Amy, were you trying to say, or Terry?
I thought there was a protection in the state of Colorado, but I didn't have time to look it up. I will say, we're sort of building on these things, and I'm heading off in another direction, but there is an issue in the community. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless did a study not too long ago about evictions, and really found that in cases of eviction, landlords were mostly represented most of the time, 90+% of the time, and and tenants weren't. Tenants were represented maybe 3% of the time. When tenants were represented, they won 90% of the time. And so there is a need for legal aid in this community for people who do feel like they have been treated unfairly and to get the resources that they need, the legal resources that they need.
Mayor, as the only attorney, to the best of my knowledge, on this panel, what do you think of that? About legal aid, perhaps either city, regional, some other way to get that legal aid, either for the homeless, either not to become a protected class, but to be able to be protected so they can be helped.
Pikes Peak Legal Aid does represent tenants, and it's just a question of capacity. But Pikes Peak Legal Aid, a block north of the Police Operations Center on North Nevada, is available to take tenants as clients. The issue is there's been regularly declining levels of legal aid funding across the country, and I'm sure there's a capacity issue there as well.
It seems like so far, and maybe you see it as well, there's a lot of collaboration here. There's a lot of hope here. There are still problems that still need to be solved, but there's still a lot of hope and that things can happen. It's just about taking, as you were talking, Terry, it's taking a bite out of the big pie to eventually gobble up the problem. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because there was something prior to our conversation today, we were just chatting prior to it all, the fact that these agencies actually make a cognizant effort, and you can hear it now, a cognizant effort to talk to one another, to talk about the problems, and to talk about how their individual agencies can actually affect solutions. Terry?
So actually, it's in our mission statement to collaborate. We don't expect that we can do everything on our own. We don't have the expertise, we don't have all the funding, and there's people who do it well already. And some of our best partners are right here at this table. The Department of Human Services, I don't want to steal all your thunder if you're going to talk about it in a minute, is one of our best partners actually in our resource center on our campus each and every single day. Aspen Point, our behavioral health provider, is on our campus each and every single day. Peak Vista has a strong and growing medical presence on our campus, not yet each and every day, but growing. The VA, the Department of Parole and Reentry, CSFD and PD have spent time with us and worked with us and are on our campus because that's where the concentration of the population is at, not the only concentration, but a significant concentration. And so we do talk to each other. We depend on each other. And we frankly could not be doing the work that we're doing at the mission without the people that I just mentioned and the foot forward that they've put to help us. You want to detail yours? I don't want to steal your thunder.
Sure. So we have a technician that's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at the Rescue Mission, and they two. And they see an average of 258 was the last time I saw the figures last month, clients, and that's a heavy caseload. So I think that's a very strong partnership. We also have staff over at Westside Cares now. That started last week on the 20th. So if you've ever been over to Westside Cares, they're very busy. So we have quick access to benefits and services and connections. So, and we also opened, we have an office down in Fountain, and we just recently got state approval to have an electronic benefits office down there, which is huge because there was only one location in the whole county, and that was our office at Guard the Gods. So now there's 2 locations down in Fountain. So that also improves access for all of our citizens and our homeless families. So real proud of those partnerships. And if you have any other ideas, let me know. We'll be open to work on more.
Collaboration is the Community Health Partnerships mission as well. And we serve, we support 170,000 Medicaid members in Park, El Paso, Albert, and Teller counties. And many of our members are homeless, and we assist with navigation, trying to connect them with services and housing. We fund respite beds through sending the health respite care so that people experiencing homelessness or discharged from hospitals after treatment have a place to go and recover, and get connected to other services. And in a really great example of collaboration at this table tonight, Community Health Partnerships putting together a program called Project Detour. We're renting a facility from the Springs Rescue Mission to provide housing recovery services for 12 women. Homeward Pikes Peak is managing that house and the case management there. So it's for substance use, women with substance use disorders, specifically opioid addiction. So it includes medication-assisted treatment. So we work with Aspen Point, we're working with the Recovery Board to make that happen.
I wanted to add that collaboration is the essence of the Pikes Peak Continuum of Care. And I forgot to mention earlier that I have 4 other board members, or 3 other board members at this table. Trig, Amy, and Chris are all members of the governing board of the Continuum of Care. And it is one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the collaboration that we foster and promote. And I made a list for us to share with you tonight. And the mayor touched on coordinated entry. This was a HUD requirement that our community rolled out about 18 months ago. Every provider that has a housing solution meets every single Wednesday at the United Way, and they bring forward their vacancies. And then every individual that's had the housing survey or the VI SPDAT name is on a list, and then we match that individual with the housing solution that best meets their need. And that collaboration happens because outreach workers go find them. We share information among each other if you've seen them last, and we find the person, we help them do the intake and get rolled into housing. It's a very collaboration-heavy program. We also have really creative collaboration from Urban Peak and the Pikes Peak Library District that rolled out last year called the Safe Place Initiative. You may see signs in the libraries now. Librarians have been trained to identify homeless youth. They've been trained in resource and referral and how to engage someone and help connect them to resources specifically. They're looking at individuals up to 24 years. So this is a wonderful way that innovation that's happening before your eyes and you don't even see it because it's seamless. And that's how we want to help kind of keep the dignity in our outreach to those experiencing homelessness. Amy mentioned the Setting to Health Respite Care. They currently rent space from the Salvation Army and have 12 units of housing co-located with the Salvation Army. Setting to Health Respite Care rents an apartment from my program, the Harbor House. So there's a ton of collaboration to end that recidivism from hospital to shelter to homelessness. People need stable health care and housing to overcome illness and get back on their feet. I could go on, but there's tons of examples of collaboration that are trying to address the root causes and the problems that contribute to homelessness.
Let's, as a famous city council member said who's sitting in the audience, this is not a kumbaya moment, but it's about collaboration and it's about something positive happening within our city. Are we seeing perhaps something within the next year, the next 2 years, that we're going to see something distinctive for, because you're working hard, you're doing all these things, you can see the money that's existing, but do we see, like, for example, with medians, so many folks homeless, standing in the medians, homeless camps, etc. Are we going to see more help for those folks if they choose to be helped? Mayor.
Well, hopefully we'll see more hope as a result of the coordinated activities that we're talking about here. But I don't want to be too kumbaya here, because on this end you've got the government. And the government is going to have to do some things that everybody else on the end, except for possibly the Department of Human Services, aren't going to have to be concerned about. It's the government that's got to put out the fires and going to have to enforce ordinances. It's the government that has to be worried about water quality in our waterways, and I'll give you a warning right now. The city attorney is researching the constitutionality of an ordinance that, because of public safety issues, would require any camping to be a certain distance away from waterways because of the E. coli impact on the waterways. That's something we have to be concerned about. That necessarily, that's the kind of thing that sometimes Craig and I are on the opposite sides of. By the way, I'm delighted with the level of compliance with the Don't Sit, Don't Lie ordinance. I think most of the police officers downtown are delighted with the level of compliance. We've got to worry about, why are shelter beds important to us? The existence of shelter beds is what legally gives us the ability to enforce our camping ordinance. The courts have said you can't enforce your no camping ordinance if you don't have the ability to offer them a shelter bed. And so only under those circumstances can Officer Lux give them the 24-hour notice and clean up the camp if they don't move the camp. Those are the things we've got to be concerned about. And it's in many instances a little different considerations than these folks who are purely meeting the homeless where they are and doing the fantastic work that they're doing.
We'll have two comments and then we're going to close it. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to add, you asked what is innovative and what's coming down the pike. So in the next month, I have two exciting meetings in my world. One is about opening a sobering center. That's a partnership between the hospitals and our El Paso County Sheriff Department and our police department. That's something that we don't have as a community. It is a gateway to detox, and often it can help stabilize a person before they need to get to detox. The second is a conversation that we're having with a variety of nonprofit organizations and our police on sanctioned villages. which is another word for legal camping. We have to have this conversation in our community. We have to find out if and when and where that may be for us.
Trick.
Legal camping. The city attorney should come talk to Blackbird. We have a much more inexpensive solution than passing a new ordinance. It's going to blow a lot of people's minds. People poop. And if you don't give them anywhere to poop, it goes in your water systems. So if we give people a toilet, it doesn't end up in the waterways. And we didn't even have to do a survey for that.
Okay, let's have
touch base on this. So there will be a difference if everybody collaborates, but what I won't see is any difference in the amount of people, or at least it doesn't seem that way. Trig talks about, hey, if we give the people certain things, trash might stop, or these things will stop. I can tell you, in no disrespect, but I can tell you that we just cleaned up an area with 55 people behind Springs Rescue Mission, and it took me 4 dumpster loads to clean up the trash, and these people were saying, we're going to keep it clean. That doesn't happen. It is very, very dirty. It is not like your camping situation if you go out in Rocky Mountain National Park. This is not like that. It's very unsafe. It's very unsanitary. Also, I just came back from California, and their biggest problem is their camps are huge, really large, 1,000 people plus, is hepatitis A. Not only for the homeless individuals, but also now they're concerned about the healthcare workers, the first responders, and the officers. So we need to do something that's correct. But I guess I'm just wondering, why would they pick up trash for whatever the pay is if they're not even picking it around their own campsite? I guess I just have that in the back of my mind.
They are. They are.
All right, wait. Tricky, get a response. Wait, hold your horse.
If you give them trash dumpsters, they pick it up. I got multiple camps I can take you to and show you myself.
All right,
Second of all, hepatitis A was not running rampant, Lieutenant, in what camp? Hepatitis A was not running rampant in what kind of camp?
In other words, in a location, is that what you're saying?
A managed legal camp. Did not have hepatitis.
All right, since we opened up this can of worms,
Yes,
we're going to
no?
deal with it. Go ahead.
Well,
True? Say it in the
let
mic.
me tell you, when I go to a mayor's conference, I go to every single session on homeless and what strategies are. Nationally, everybody is advising against a city-sponsored homeless camp. That it's an absolute disaster in terms of public safety. Assaultive behavior, needles, and the dangers that are posed. And Terry, you know what happened when we had an informal camp last summer, I think. And so I know there's a lot of people enthusiastic about that. Nationally, that is not the recommendation.
All right, let's end it here. Let's go with closing statements. This could be going on for days, which would be exciting. Don't get me wrong, it'd be very fun. Let's go ahead. We'll do our closing statements. Minute and a half. Lieutenant Butts.
So I guess in closing, I did have something, but the one thing I want to tell you is that this is a huge issue. And again, the police department is just a small part of that, a real small part, the enforcement part. But I would ask 2 things. One is, if you're really tired of people panhandling, it doesn't matter where they're panhandling. We could make an ordinance for whatever, but just stop giving them money. Stop giving money to people that and give it to the charities. I just want to make sure it's clear that I said, give it to the charities. The charities are the one that can help and do that correctly. If you're tired of people doing certain things, help us stop it. And I think they came along with good points on how to do that. But there's so many things that are wrong right now with people, in a sense, camping. Legal or not, it's the same type of situation. With the explosions that you've heard about, the fires you've heard about, the dirt, the destruction of the property, the theft that goes on. I have no idea why somebody needs a snowblower and a lawnmower better than my boss's. And he told me that when we went out there. This is much better than the lawnmower I have. And why in the world do you need a lawnmower? is because it's not theirs. Right? These things are happening right here. These are difficult times for people, but also there's an element that it fixes himself into this that we have to watch out for in law enforcement, and we just have to keep an eye on it.
Thank you. Amy Cox.
You know, we are making progress. In 2014, when the city released the initiative to end homelessness, it focused on raising awareness of the issue of homelessness in our community, building the capacity of nonprofit organizations to respond, and addressing some urgent needs quickly. And we were able to reduce barriers and increase outreach and begin to open the Springs Rescue Mission, as well as providing emergency shelter. So we are making progress. We need to finish some key projects. So I'm going to put a plug in for the Springs Rescue Mission because that campus is only half finished. It's only half to the vision of what it is supposed to be. They are building the plane in flight. They're serving people while they're under construction. So I think we have to follow through with that. We have to have the kitchen. We have to have the triage center, the resource center. When folks come in, we have to have a secured facility there. So I want to put a plug in for that. I also want to put a plug in for the affordable housing projects and the supportive housing projects that are already on the books. We need to finish those as a community and watch how this works for us. The one thing we aren't doing very well, and I don't have the answer, and I want to have this conversation with the people in the room here, not tonight, but we aren't building public trust. And I don't understand where that comes from. Is it from a lack of communication? Is it because of is it the visible, is it some of the visible homelessness that doesn't feel like it's being addressed in a meaningful way? I want to know what we need to do as the leadership in this community to earn your trust so that we all have a common purpose. When Salt Lake City had a common purpose for Housing First, they built 1,000 units of supportive housing. When Los Angeles agreed that homelessness was a priority, they taxed themselves, I'm not telling you to do that, but they passed a tax and a bond measure of $1.2 billion to build housing and supportive services. That's what happens when we have a shared commitment, that we all connect to this issue and share in the responsibility. So I hope that is the next conversation we're going to have.
Thank you. That could be a future community conversation. Chris Garrett.
I would just like to close by saying there's a lot of compassion in this room because you're here tonight. Carry that forward out in the community and help us build compassion for homelessness. Don't fear homelessness, but come up with solutions and work together on this. Continue our collaborations, seek funding together, partner any way we can. One thing we saw in Salt Lake City was they had a huge campaign on homelessness, and it was about building compassion. I think was it a senator, remember Amy? Were you with me on that trip? There was I forget, it's been a long time ago. It was a public official who lent herself to billboards and a public campaign about bringing awareness to the homeless issues and what can we do together to solve this. So I would encourage that we need to look at doing some of that around here because I hear every day negativity about the homeless person on the corner. I live up on Mesa Road, King Supers. I've been up and down Guard of the Gods. I see people, and I think I've talked to every homeless or panhandler on Guard of the Gods. They have my resource cards. And I get frustrated. I see them there week after week, but some actually once stopped me and said, thanks for taking the time to give me that information. I made it over to Springs Rescue Mission or wherever they decided to go. So that felt good. That's one person. But having some time and compassion for this issue is important. So take that word out to everybody and, bring them on.
Trick Bungard. It's okay to clap.
It's always a tricky subject when you're talking about the marginalized or the other in society that we don't want to acknowledge that we do that to. I can't agree with what's been said so far enough that probably the biggest challenge ahead of us as a city is to recognize that we do that, A, and then move past that together because I don't want to show my progressive colors a little too much here, but we are one of the lowest tax cities in America. So you can't constantly be looking at the city and saying, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with your no money? So we have decided as a culture that we are going to be an independent people from government tax, right? So that means we need to solve it together as a people, not looking to organizations and institutions to do it, but as a groundswell of movement and togetherness to solve this. Because the problem's only going to get worse if we're waiting on solutions down the road. There's things to do now. Unfortunately, the lieutenant and I are in deep disagreement. I know that at Springs Rescue Mission, there were 2 major dumpsters provided, and the vast majority of those dumpsters were filled by the people moving out of that camp to try to show the city that we can clean up after ourselves. The majority of the mess left afterwards were people that refused to leave. But the majority of people filled there. And right now, if you were to go down the trail to the south, you're going to see where those people moved to. And they have no dumpsters now, but they are trying desperately to keep everything bagged up in huge piles of black trash bags, waiting for someone to come along and pick them up. Blackbird's not allowed on the trails with their vehicles. They really like to be allowed on the trails. So we can go pick them up, or someone else from the city, which you don't have any money to do, we understand. But that could be another thing, if we could have a groundswell of movement saying, hey, if there's people willing to go out and pick up trash from these camps that do pick up their trash and actually do take care of their needles, and there aren't really that many needles out there. Oh my.
All right, all right.
I'm in the camp.
All right, Trey, let's wrap it up. And you're right there. Come on.
I would love to invite everyone out to our needle-free camps any day of the week, including the mayor himself.
All right. Terry Anderson.
I'm going to stay out of the needle thing. But I am going to say that my wife and I have lived in this community for 30 years. We raised 5 kids here. We have seen Colorado Springs rise up in the face of significant disasters, in challenges that seemed insurmountable. We have pulled up a community that people had thought had been past its prime, that wasn't going to be able to hang on to our kids because they were leaving for cooler cities to work, and that trend's reversed. We have done some fantastic things, and we can fix this. This is not impossible. It will take a collective will. It will take effort, and yes, it will take money. But we can do this. Housing, health, and work. And if you have not visited your Springs Rescue Mission that many of you have helped support in very specific and sacrificial ways for which we are very grateful, would you please come visit it? Would you please come see what's happening? Because for many of us, the only thing we know is what we see on a median, or see in a downtown street, or maybe see from the highway as we're driving up or down I-25. And there is so much more happening. And the last shameless plug, if you want to be involved in the world of work for the people we serve, Mission Catering is a local business that employs people that we've talked about tonight, and we would love to earn your catering business.
Thank you.
So I want to echo some of the things that my colleagues and friends have said. The answer to this problem is all of us working together. There's really traditional ways that citizens help nonprofit organizations, and it's through volunteerism, it's through financial support, and it's through advocacy. Some of the things that we need to do as a community are going to take public policy change, and we're going to need you to be paying attention to what that is. From talking to your congressman about preserving the LIHTC tax credit, which is a bond issue that happens at the federal level, we need to be paying attention to that. And when we come to talk to you about city ordinances that are going to allow increased access to accessory dwelling units, we need you to pay attention and vote for those changes so that we can have affordable housing of all different kind of housing stock in our community. So I ask you, I implore you to pay attention to the advocacy that's going to happen on public policy, get involved financially or through volunteerism, and just be a myth buster. You've come here tonight for a lot of good information. Share this with those who you work with and you live near, because we all need to be informed and engaged in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for coming out. Thanks to the Gazette, thanks to the sponsors. A couple of quick follow-up items. The city will be unveiling a campaign in March, including signage that will encourage folks to give directly to service providers instead of giving to panhandlers. We are also also going to place 6 dumpsters close to trails, but obviously with access to garbage trucks that can get to them. We'll see whether the extent to which they're used by the homeless, but if nothing else, we're doing it because it's easier for the city to accomplish the cleanups if the dumpsters are there. Finally, I will tell you that increased camp and trail cleanups will be a very serious priority for the city in 2018. I want to end by saying I think one of the areas of agreement by everybody up here is this is not just a government problem. The city is not going to solve this problem. And what I have to tell each of the organizations that are up here and in the audience that are out there meeting the homeless where they are, how much I and other folks that work for me in the city sincerely appreciate that. The government is not going to do a good job of meeting them where they are. It's these organizations that are going to do that. And I am so very grateful. My last thing, I want to introduce Andrew Phelps, who's the city's homeless outreach coordinator. After the meeting, if you want to assault me, assault Andy instead. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And give everyone here a round of applause. Thank you for being here. And you know what? Thank you for being here as well, because this is what's about. Dialogue, discussion. We may not agree on everything, but at least we have open talks to discuss it. And if we don't do that, we don't have community conversations. With that in mind, I'd like to thank our Gazette News Facebook platform audience who's watching as well. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for participating, all of you on Facebook. I'm Eric Singer, live on our Gazette News Facebook platform. We'll see you next time for another Gazette-sponsored community conversation.